Ditch Authority sits in a quasi-judicial role, which means that you take in that evidence and information you receive, you weigh it against each other, and then ultimately make a decision about the scope of repairs moving forward. All it takes is a petition by one person to demand that the Drainage Authority look.
They're new poles, they're down about 9 feet. The guy from Minnesota Power said they would de-electrify the line when we do the project. And they would take out, there's cable ties tying the poles, supporting the poles. They would take out all those cable ties, and they would have no issue with us getting down that 3 to 4 feet around, so we'll get drainage, but the posts will stay in there. And they said the integrity of the posts will be okay because they are 9 feet in the ground. Not a lot. That lateral is pretty straightforward. There's some brush, but not large trees like there is on the other lateral. So for the cost estimate for lateral 3 that I got from the contractor for chipping the brush, excavating the spoil, and leveling the spoil, for that 2,427 feet is $250 per foot, so $6,067.50. And then, like I said, Minnesota Power will come and de-electrify that line and then remove the anchors during the project so that that won't be in the way. Lateral 2, I had the contractor also give me an estimate on that, but he has since said he's no longer interested in cleaning lateral 2. So I will have to find a different contractor for lateral 2.
Okay. We can open it up to public questions and comments.
Chairman Newman, maybe if the board has any questions for Ms. Eulenkamp first, we can do those now, and then we'll open up for public questions and comments.
All right. Board, any questions for Nancy?
So did it take 2 separate petitions to get these 2 laterals cleaned, or was this one petition for both laterals, or how did that work?
So it's a maintenance request.
This is just a maintenance request?
Yep, and so there was 2 laterals that were requested.
Requested, okay. All right.
There has been no formal petition.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, no?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think that the board now can move into public questions and comments. If it's okay at the chair, it'd be helpful if landowners would come to the microphone or would state their name and address and where their property is located,
Okay.
so we can help keep track of the comments in relation to the property interest.
All right. So we're going to open the floor up to public comment. Anybody who would like to speak, please come up and sit down and state your name and your concerns. And
my name's Greg Ringler. My address is in Pillager, but property that I own is in Bruce Township. It's Ron Skya and myself own this property. I don't know if you want the parcel number here or not, but 400114000 040010-200. There's 2 40-acre parcels there. It's on the north end of 335th Avenue. On the west side of the road, it's 80 acres there. My comment or question is concerning the private ditch that we have on the north end of our property, shared by property owners to our west and to the north. And I know you mentioned that that benefited landowners here. That ditch, that private ditch is as well not flowing. On top of that, the township has recently put in a cul-de-sac at the end of 335th with a new culvert running from east to west, therefore putting water onto our property. I met with the county soil and water, forgive me, I don't have his name, but to question digging out the ditch along 335th. He said it would not do any good. The land lays the wrong direction. So the water coming in under this new culvert is basically sitting on our property. Originally, we were able to hay the north and south end. We cannot do that any longer for quite some time. As far as terms of my question on this private ditch, legality-wise, we basically own half of that private ditch, east to west. Are we able to clean that out? Is part of this project, could it be cleaned out? Because right now it's not benefiting us or our neighbors to the west. The water just is not flowing out of there. And I don't know if it's just an age filled up with silt or what it is, but it kind of lays, from what I understand, our land doesn't drain to it as it should. I guess that's, question is that on the ditch laws.
Mr. Chair, what did you say your last name was?
Ringler, R-I-N-G-L-E-R. Ron Skaya is listed first, Ron Skaya, S-K-A-J-A.
Okay, all right. Okay, and so are you said you're on 35th,
North end of, yep, the north.
so
very
you're
end
up
of-
by lateral 1 up there?
Yeah, we'd be south of that. It's
South of lateral, so it's that private lateral?
Yep, that private lateral you see, that would be our north property line. We have
Okay.
80 acres along 335th.
Okay.
40 acres deep.
All right, so private laterals are not part of the county ditch system that the county can pay to clean it? But as long as you meet all of soil and waters rules, you should be able to get permission from them to clean it. They would make a decision on if they would clean it or not.
Okay, in terms of, I needed permission from the neighbor as well, I assume, because we don't own that whole piece,
Right,
you know,
yep.
so.
Correct. Either if you have a written agreement with them or an easement agreement, look to that to see if you have permission or get their cooperation and permission.
So is it up to us to become benefactors of ditch 40? By cleaning out this?
No, you're actually already on the assessment roll for ditch 40?
I realize we
Yep.
are, but we're not benefiting from ditch 40 because there's nothing going, it just doesn't get there. It hasn't for some time. I mean, our land has gone from being able, like I say, being able to hay to, muck boots, so.
So, Mr. Chairman, I can answer that. The, being in the benefited area of County Ditch 40 is what allows for that private ditch to be constructed when it was first constructed, and then to be maintained and continue to be operated. If that land was not in the benefited area, then the landowners who are in the watershed of that private ditch would need us to submit a petition, and we'd have to notice and hold a hearing for that land to come in. So since it's already benefited, you do not need to do anything further with the drainage authority in order to outlet that land into the ditch system.
Okay.
But you do need to, like Nancy mentioned, make sure you comply with
With
environmental
sign.
laws and get landowner permission if you have to leave your property to do some of that work.
Okay. In terms of what water's coming onto our property, is that a township issue? I mean, they came and put this nice big culvert in, but it's basically just putting more water on. And there is another culvert I found underneath 335th, kind of halfway down our property, old one there's water slowly coming in there. Is that a township issue to see about?
So I'm not familiar with the project, but assuming what you said is true, which is it's the township's construction sending water onto you, that would be outside of what the drainage authority could manage. That'd be between yourself as an impacted landowner by that and the road authority or the township who constructed it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Evening.
Hi, my name is Brian Becker and I'm representing Bruce Township. We just have a few questions regarding the letter that was sent out. The first question is, and I've talked to Nancy about this a little bit, but Grosbeak Road, everything that we can find even in besides our records in the township or the county records, Grosbeak Road has been abandoned for years down there in that half-mile stretch, so we don't understand why we're being levied for that. The other one is 335th is beyond the ditch itself, so we're trying to figure that out also. But the biggest one is the Grosbeak Road one. And then the final question I have would be, why is the township being levied, but the county and the state is not, with a state highway that goes over that ditch and a county highway that are major arteries that are going to Swanville from Long Prairie versus Long Prairie to Little Falls? There's nothing in there that says that there's any benefit to the state or the town or the county when those two roads are impacted by that also. Those are my questions.
Good question. Go ahead.
Good question.
So
So
I
you go
had-
first, or you want me to?
You can go first. I had talked to you about Grosbeak Road already, and I will bring up the
Okay.
assessment roll for the county roads.
Okay, so excellent questions. Nothing in what's being proposed here for repair or maintenance changes the benefits or assessments that are currently of record. But there are ways that that can be done, but it would be a different proceeding from this. The drainage code allows for, if the township has gone through the statutory process of vacating a road, to use that as a basis for canceling an assessment. So if we can find the records and show that there are records showing the township followed that statutory procedure, that's something that can be addressed and that assessment can be removed from the benefits roll. Nancy's gonna pull those up. I think it's just a question of making sure that we have the records showing that the township actually went through it. Your second question was why some other road authorities aren't benefited. It could be that they do benefit, but again, nothing about a repair procedure changes what was done when the drainage system was benefited. If in the future there's a redetermination of benefits proceeding, or if there is a more expensive formal repair proceeding where an engineer gets appointed and they determine the road authority benefits, but they're not on the benefits roll, those public hearings and procedures allow for bringing in other entities that aren't currently on the roll. But we'd have to be going through a redetermination procedure or a formal petition to repair, or an engineer is appointed to do that. The drainage code, in doing these, sometimes we call them minor maintenance or non-petitioned repair proceedings, doesn't change what the current benefits of record are.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, so as far as the state, I don't know why the state wasn't put on there. There's nothing in the viewer's report addressing the state. But as far as the county roads go, County Road 12 at the outlet of that was found benefits equals damages. So they were actually, and I believe it's because they are responsible for that bridge that's down there. So they were found benefits equals damages, so they were given no benefit. So they were looked at by the viewers at that time. And it's a large bridge structure that's on the road.
Typically what that means going forward is that if that bridge were to be repaired, rather than the drainage system paying for it, the road
The
authority
road
would pay
authority
for it.
pays for it.
Okay,
So
so
they
that's
were-
basically set up the same way then that I don't remember the road number there, but we replaced culverts in the township over that, I would say probably 12 years ago.
Yep.
And those were paid for through the township. It's the one right there by Pillsbury, where it goes under, what is that, I'm not even sure what it is, three something maybe, 320? 331?
331, yeah.
So those were my questions. I just didn't understand, because I know in 72, we talked to some of the board members that were on the board back then. And part of the reason for cleaning that ditch in 72 is because 27 was affected. Because that all backed up there and it basically was eroding the banks of the road. So that was the whole reason for that being, I mean, that was one of the number one reasons of why that ditch was cleaned back then. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that if we start on one end of this ditch, we're gonna have to look at possibly going through the whole thing. Because starting on the north end of this ditch and cleaning it out, the bottom half of that ditch has been plugged for years. And what I mean by plugged is you brought up numbers here a little bit ago that says that this thing is supposed to be 17 feet wide at the top.
It varied. I mean,
13
it
feet?
varied a lot from what.
I
it
don't
was.
know if there's a place on that river that has them types of banks anymore. This thing has been eroded. Everybody's got to remember, this thing hasn't been cleaned for what, 40 some years. It hasn't been, nobody's done anything with it. So realistically, if we go to the north end and we clean a couple laterals, is it really gonna do any good if we don't clean the remainder of the ditch? So them are the questions that are being posed to me as a township supervisor by a lot of people that have contacted me. What good does it do us to build a bowl up on the one end if it has nowhere to drain? I know this ditch fairly well because I grew up there. I can remember back in the 80s, 88, we rode four-wheelers through that ditch because it was completely dry. This ditch has never been that wide for years. Where I'm going with this is I think that if you're looking at the one end, in order to benefit anybody along that ditch, the whole thing's gotta be cleaned or it ain't gonna do anything. That's my personal opinion based on what I know of the ditch.
Mr. Chair, it's a public waters, so we're gonna have to follow DNR rules if we clean that. I've asked DNR in the past about other ditch systems, and their first requirement was a engineering study. Surveying would be their first requirement. I'm not sure if we would actually get permission to clean the whole thing. That would be something we would, if there's actually interest in doing it, that I would have to sit down with the DNR and ask what they're gonna require for us to clean
Yes.
that.
And I
that's the
know
only-
just from certain people that are downstream that own quite a bit of the land down there, they don't want nothing done to it.
Right.
They
'Cause-
want
and
it
that's-
left alone.
Yeah, and that's, if this wasn't also a public waters, it would be a way easier process, but since it is public waters, it's going to be a much more involved, expensive process.
Okay, so I just gotta go back to this Grosbeak Road thing.
Yep,
As far as the township goes, how do we get that so that it's no longer on this? Because everybody that we've talked to says that it has been abandoned for many, many years.
okay, so do you have that documentation?
I don't have it with me. We're
Okay.
still trying to
Is it
find
the same documentation though that GIS has?
Yes.
Okay, because GIS only has that a half a mile if it was abandoned, the rest of it is
Yep.
still there.
But the half a mile that's abandoned is the quarter mile each way of that river.
Yep. The other, it's also still in the benefited area though, for the rest of the rest of the road is also still in the benefited area.
What year was that done?
What's
Mr.
that?
Becker, what year was the vacation
We're
of the road
trying to
done?
find that.
Okay.
District 5 came in, and my dad was the one that was telling me about this. District 5 came in and basically abandoned a bunch of roadways at the time. So we're trying to find that documentation in our files. We just haven't, I mean, this was short notice, so we're
Is that
trying to find it.
MnDOT District 5?
What's that?
The
Yes.
DOT
Yep.
District 5, okay.
Yep. So we're trying to find that. I know we have it. It's just a matter of where. In our filing, our filing's not the greatest.
So, Mr. Chair, just to talk about the timing of this thing, once the levy goes out for collection, then there's gonna be a collection period, and there's gonna be a due date on that assessment, where that township's assessment becomes due. If the proper documentation can be found before that due date, the Drainage Code does allow for the Drainage Authority to petition to cancel an assessment that's levied, but we have to have the documentation. So if it was done, but it wasn't properly documented, or it was never done, then there's a risk that the collection of the assessment becomes due before the township can vacate its assessment. But just as we think through the timing of this thing, if we're confident it was done and that the paperwork exists, we just have to find it. There is some time in order to accommodate that concern.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Because this is the, so this section is abandoned, but that's
It's not.
still on.
Okay.
Good evening.
Hello,
Hello, Jeremiah Detterman. I'm on County 105, Section 27.
Yep.
I just had some questions on like when the last time maintenance was done, and at what point does it just seem to be an abandoned ditch?
So the last time maintenance was done was that 1972.
No funds or anything
No,
for it?
no.
All right, so where I'm at is the Swan River, County Ditch 40 stuff, so there's really no way to do maintenance on the stretch either way for my property, right? If it's the Swan River. So,
There would be, but we would have to jump through a lot of hoops with the DNR.
because I kind of understand it as County Ditch 40, you can maintain the laterals and that's about it.
There would be a lot of hoops to jump through with the DNR.
Sure.
Yeah.
So is there a way to get pulled off of that?
So, Chairman Newman, and great question, Mr. Detterman. There is in the Drainage Code a statute for landowners to petition to remove their property from a drainage system. The challenge is gonna be that for the board to approve it, the statute requires that you essentially show that something has happened to your property where it's no longer, the water's no longer flowing to or using that drainage system, which is a hard standard to prove. What Ms. Eulenkamp is saying is that the County Ditch 40 portion that is also public waters, Little Swan River, can be repaired. And the Drainage Authority enjoys certain exemptions under the public waters law that says if all you're doing is maintenance, you are exempt from a public waters work permit. But to meet or reach that exemption, we have to show to the DNR that the work we're doing is not going to substantially affect the public water course. And the DNR has a process for that, and plenty of drainage authorities go through it. Plenty of drainage systems go through that process and expense. It's cheap, or not cheap, it takes a long time. And so in this case, we'd want to make absolutely certain that the change that landowners would experience from repairing that portion of public water is worth the expense. And my understanding is there hasn't been large landowner support to say, yeah, we want to spend the money on hiring an engineer, getting the modeling done, going after the permit, and then doing the work. But if that were to change, there is a process to do that, and that could be accomplished.
So does it become abandoned if it's just neglected for 50 years?
So there is no, maybe we'll call it like a de facto abandonment or just automatic abandonment over time. The drainage code has a statute, 103E.811, that says the drainage system can be abandoned. It has to be initiated by a petition that's signed by at least 51% of the property owners that are assessed on the whole system. And then if that petition is turned in, the drainage authority would notice and hold a hearing, and it would be an obligation of any landowners on the system to show up at that hearing and make a written objection to that abandonment. If someone objects, then the drainage authority has to appoint 3 viewers to go and inspect and determine whether or not the drainage system still provides any benefit to those objectors' lands. And if they do, then the drainage authority can't approve the abandonment. So it would, essentially require either showing the drainage system provides no function, which is probably unlikely in this case, or getting unanimous landowner support to say, we no longer want to have any right-of-way here for the drainage authority. An abandonment just means that the right-of-way is released and the property is again owned by the individual underlying landowners. So it would require cooperation among everybody to do work in the future. The abandonment just releases the county of its obligation to inspect and make decisions on when to do maintenance.
Right, and I guess that's kind of my point is, if you remove it as County Ditch 40, it reverts back to the Swan River, and it is what it is, what don't cost the landowners.
If a petition for abandonment were to be approved and the right-of-way were to be released back, it's probably less likely that there could be permits on the public water course to do future work, because we'd be giving up some of that exemption rights. But if that's what unanimously all the landowners want, there's a process to do that.
Sure. All right, that's it.
Thank you. All right, anybody else?
Good evening.
Hi.
Jim Schuett. I own the property on the Goose Break Road there. So that would be right along lateral 3, I believe.
Yep.
And I agree with Brian, a lot of what he said. I grew up on that same piece of property and, we know it very well. I guess my question is, maybe more so for lateral 3 than the other one, but I was under the understanding the gentleman that made the request had offered to dig it and pay for it himself. Is there a reason that's not possible?
He would not have an outlet because the first 1,000 feet of that ditch was what he could clean because it's on his property.
Yep.
The rest of that ditch line is not owned by him, so he would not be able to clean it.
So I own that. Would I be able to give him permission to clean that at his expense or
You
our
could, yeah,
expense?
if he would be willing to do that, yes.
And then everybody,
And then there's one other landowner past you.
not to, oh yeah, there is, just
Yep.
for a very short, but I think he would be on board too. What would the process be to get that and get that process rolling, or how do we go about seeing if that's a possibility, I guess?
That would be what's called a hold harmless agreement. You would just have the paperwork, you would sign it, that other landowner would need to sign it, Dave Van Heel would need to sign it, and then just submit it as a hold harmless agreement process.
Okay, because I think the only one that wants that one cleaned is Dave. Like everybody has said, this thing hasn't been cleaned forever. And I think most of us are okay with that. And as Brian referenced, it's not gonna do any good to dig the ditch deeper because it's got nowhere to go. So, I think if he's willing to dig it, I think that would be, in my opinion, that would be beneficial for everybody that's on the assessment roll.
Okay? And you've already talked to Dave about
I
that?
have not,
Okay.
no, I didn't know if that was a possibility or not.
Okay. It would be a hold harmless agreement.
Okay, I will reach out to Dave though, and talk to him and see what his thoughts are. And Mark, I guess, I think, was it Mark? That was the last little bit there.
So the process with that is once you get that agreement with him to hold harmless, get it signed, get it to Nancy. Nancy will submit it to, put it on the board agenda.
Okay.
Commissioner board agenda, and we'll put it on one of our Tuesday, either the first Tuesday or the third Tuesday of the month meeting. And we go from there. We vote on it and move it forward.
And you know how to get a hold of that other landlord?
I
that
do,
other-
yes.
Okay,
Yep,
okay.
that's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yep.
Again, you know who I am. I did talk to David Van Heel about this, and David is willing to clean that ditch out himself. He came to the county looking for permission to talk, or basically get his portion cleaned out, and to see if he could get the landowners to agree, you, and then also I believe it's Jack McCoy. That's what he was looking for when he came to the county to do this. And when I approached him and talked to him last week about this, he told me that if he would have been aware that this was gonna cost other people down this stream, he would have never agreed to putting this on this thing. Him and Sean have both told me that all they wanna do is clean the ditch out themselves. So there, as far as what I understand of my conversation with him, he does not want David Hassey and McCoy and Schuett and anybody else on that river to be assessed for his clean out. That's how he explained it to me. So I believe he is willing to clean that one section out himself.
Okay.
All right?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Oops, sorry. That's a $5 penalty. Anybody else? Okay. Okay, let's see. So what's next?
So, Mr. Chair, I believe what's next is, if there's any further questions from the commissioners for Nancy or I, we can take those at this time. If there's not, I think it's the a wish of your drainage inspector that the board take the information it received today and think about this, consider it, and she'll bring it back to the board for a decision at a future meeting.
So what do we do about lateral 2?
For lateral 2, what do you mean? With the no
So-
estimate?
Well, and for the, if that goes through, that would be assessed to all the landowners.
So, without an estimate at this time, there's really nothing for the board to make a decision on yet. If there are landowners who come forward and work out the private agreement to do it on their own, then that can alleviate the need to do a repair, but I think is that on lateral 2 or lateral 3?
Lateral 2.
That's on lateral 2?
Lateral 3 is the Van Heel shoot.
I think going forward, since we don't have a contractor willing to do an estimate right now, we have no choice but to continue that for a future board discussion. But I think the board has created an opportunity to take comments from landowners. I think at this point, it's just a matter of if that lateral needs to have work done that's not done privately, for Nancy to bring a estimate to the board for it to review and decide on at a future date.
Okay. Board members, you guys have any more questions? Okay, so
Anything else, Nancy?
I did ask a contractor for a estimate, and he never got back to me. So that's why I don't have an estimate.
Okay. Okay, so what do you wanna do?
So is your plan to go ask other contractors or wait and see sometime with what the landowners come back with on the private work?
That's up to what contractor will work out there, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll have to wait till we try to find a contractor? Okay,
But in the meantime, they could clean lateral 3 on
Yep,
their own.
if Dave wants to
so choose
submit
they could
a
get that
hold harmless
petition,
for the
get that
rest of
rolling,
it.
so we could knock that off of this whole.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
all right. So we'll wait to hear further information on the contractor. If they bring in the hold harmless, they can proceed with that, get that to the board,
Yep.
okay? Any other comments from out there? If not, we can adjourn, correct?
Correct.
All right. So thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. And we'll adjourn.